Welcome to podcast 196, 196th episode. We're doing well. We're cooking with gas. This week, it's an actual systems podcast, and that's going to be the name of the podcast, an actual systems podcast, because if you listened last week, you'll have known or you've heard it was just loads of Q&As. It was just one big Q&A. I loved it because it means I haven't had to do that much work for this week's podcast, because this week's was supposed to be last week's, and we've got well ahead of ourselves. So it's all about systems. Are you a hand feeder? Are you a system grower? What media do you use? What methods do you use if you are a system grower? Top tip, and I said this last week, if you were a systems grower, apply the hand feeders mentality to being to your system, because a lot of people will take a system on because essentially they want to be lazy, and that's not a bad reason. If you want to be lazy with your feeding, that's okay, but you should spend that time that you get back on your plants. You should be looking for deficiencies, toxicities. You should be looking for pest disease. You should be looking for stretching, or you should be monitoring your environment. So spend the extra time wisely, and you'll get much better results. So, as you all know, the ones that are listened over the last year, we have partners, and hopefully you'll have all noticed that the quality and the production value of the podcast has gone up. Certainly our subscribers have gone up. The amount of downloads that we get each month is skyrocketed. So, and that's a big thank you to our partners. They are CANNA Nutrients. You can follow them on Instagram, canna.official. And they are, not just because they're partners, I pick out the best qualities of our partners, and I talk about them so that you can decide whether you think that they are the nutrient for you or the product for you. But CANNA Nutrients are the best nutrients if you're a beginner. The brilliant nutrients for all types of growers, because they're consistent. You pretty much guaranteed the result with CANNA, because they do all the hard work for you. If you don't like to pH, don't worry, because CANNA's A and B will correct any pHs for you. And it's just an easy to use, simple, and you'll get the same results time and time again. So big shout out to CANNA Nutrients. Also, we have AutoPot watering systems. Now, talking about AutoPot, we've got a little bit of a special for you. On Friday last week, then we had Jason from AutoPot ring in from Colombia. Now, he's doing a few projects in Colombia, and he's going to America. He's going to the MG Biz. And I thought we were going to talk about what he was doing and what he was going to get up to at MG Biz. And it turned out to be about an hour-long podcast, really good. And we probably spent 10 minutes talking about what he's actually doing there now. And we spent about 50 minutes just talking about really good stuff that we don't talk about that often in the UK, if you catch me drift. I'm going to release that podcast. I'm going to release 2 podcasts next week. I'm going to have this podcast, which will be released on Sunday. I'm going to drop the AutoPot podcast after the live show next Wednesday, so you'll be able to all listen to it straight away. Really good podcast, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. And that's AutoPot watering systems, one of the most widely sold systems in the world today. We also have can filters. Can filters have been a long-time partner of the NPK shop, and we were made up that we're a partner of the podcast as well. We're one of the first companies to match fans with filters. If you've got a filter that is not matched to a fan, then how do you know that you're getting the right amount of air pulled through and clean through your filter? They were one of the first companies to do that, and they supply quality filters, quality fans, EC and AC, and you can't go wrong with them. Brilliant company, and made up to have them as a partner. We also have SANlight LED. Now, you know the love for SANlight. We've been to the facility. We've met the owners. We've met the team. We've met the people who put the lights together. Top quality facility, top quality lights. And the biggest credit I can give to SANlight is that the people that bought them in the summer, because that's when most people buy LEDs to combat heat, they've continued to use them in October, November, and I know that some people will be using into December as well. So that tells me they've had results over the summer. They were that happy with them. They've continued to use them along with HPS into the winter, and that is probably the biggest credit that we can give to SANlight. While I'm on that subject, there was a lot of talk last week about mixing spectrums. Now, lighting is a topic that you could spend absolutely years and years and years. My good friend Theo, he used to work for Gavita. In my opinion, he was one of the main people who made Gavita what you know it to be today, one of the biggest lighting companies in the world. And he's now moved to Fluence, an LED company. So I rang up Theo because I wasn't sure on whether you can mix LED and mix HPS spectrums. Now, to clear everything up, Theo pretty much taught me everything I know about lighting, and Theo and books and hands-on experience. That's where my lighting knowledge comes from, because it's very complex. And what Theo told me is that there's absolutely no problem with mixing LED, full spectrum LED, with HPS. So if you do checkerboard with full spectrum LED and HPS, LED, HPS, you'll absolutely have no problems at all. The problem will come when you use very narrow spectrum LEDs and use those with HPS. So if you use an LED that's heavy on the blue or heavy on the red and you use HPS, that's where you can potentially get problems. So I could correct myself because I wasn't sure, and I made up and give you some genuine advice and facts. If you want to checkerboard with LED and HPS, full spectrum LED, I should say, crack on, because you'll probably get a really nice result. And then the question of, should you checkerboard LED and HPS, or should you go full LED? In the winter, it's obvious you use HPS because you need that heat. And in the summer, you're going to go full LED because you don't need that heat. In an ideal world where money isn't a problem and LED lights do tend to still be expensive, you would probably get slightly better results if you went all LED with a perfect environment against all HPS in the perfect environment. Because as we've talked about in the past, you're going to get a better terpene profile with LEDs because they don't tend to burn off. I'm definitely going to come up with a better word than burn off, but they're not going to burn off the volatile terpenes, and you're going to get a really nice result. So UK420 on Instagram has asked the question of LED and CMH. Not a question I asked Theo, but I've spoken to people this week about this subject, and they said that people that they know that are doing LED and ceramic metal halide aren't getting the results that they expected. So again, I'm going to hold my hands up and say I don't want to make any concrete advice or say my opinion is absolutely gold standard, but LED and CMH, I'm now skeptical about that. Haven't tried it myself, but the people I'm speaking to are saying that what you would imagine the results to be, they're not quite coming back that way. So happy I could correct myself, happy I can give some proper solid advice. And last but by no means least, we have Revolution Microelectronics, who do the Avicii LED. They do the double-ended ceramic metal halide, and they do the Diva, the Revolution Diva, 1,000-watt square wave technology, and really good lights. So very happy to have them all on board. So systems, this is the podcast. We've introduced you to our partners, and we're going to talk a little bit about some controversial with Grow Genius after the intro. Stay tuned.
All good? Ready to go? Turn my voice up a little bit. Oh, I've got everyone watching, the whole family.
Are you ready to go? I built a piece in the house that I built, in the house that I built.
I know people tune in every Sunday to listen, but even when business is good, we still manage to do the podcast.
I love everyone watching live because you all have to sit there and wait while I create a little bit of sound so Coach knows where to put the intro in. It's just that awkward moment where the intro goes, but the people who are watching live don't get to see it. We've got a solution now. We have the Roadcaster, which we use to Coachy will tell you what it actually does. It does something to the podcast that's really good, apparently. But it's got all these fancy buttons on. So apparently we can press a button so you can actually listen to the intro as well. So I'm not going to exclude you from the intros from within a few weeks. We'll just press a button. We'll all listen to the intro and we can crack on with the podcast. So the controversial issue we had this week was with Grow Genius, and they appeared on an Instagram that I'm not going to give any love or credit to, because although they do certain good things, some of the team are waving goodbye. See you later, you brummy bastards. I love the brummy bastards, really. They make up like half the team, so I have to love brummies, because if I didn't, half my team would go missing. So I'm not going to give them any exposure, because what they do is good in a way. They make sure that the industry stays on its toes. They are looking for products and manufacturers and things going on within the industry that shouldn't be going on. A little bit like what we try to do. But in certain circumstances, they jump the gun a little bit. So the jump in the gun on this particular issue was with Grow Genius, the mono silicic acid that we had with Pete 2 weeks ago. And they said, because it's suspended in ethanol, the description I put on the podcast was it's suspended in ethanol, which is why, and it's how it allows them to get a 40% concentration on the monosilicic acid. Someone's just 420. You've just knocked me off by saying everybody knocking off at 420. I like it. You proper threw me off there, because I looked at the time and thought, that's where they're going. So anyway, back to the Instagram. They said that the suspension in ethanol was dangerous for the plants. So I've done further research. Before I commented, I did a little bit of further research and found that ethanol obviously is dangerous for plants. In concentrations of 5%, it can stunt plant growth. In concentrations of 10% ethanol, it can severely stunt plant growth. And at 25% ethanol concentration, it will kill your plant. So you can sort of jump to the conclusion that, it's suspended in ethanol. That could be dangerous for plants. But this product's actually not new. It's new to the hydroponics industry. It's not new to the agriculture industry. It's been used for many, many years. And the suspension ethanol is just a very simplified version of what it actually is. It's suspended in a derivative of ethanol, and that's why it's not dangerous. But let's assume it was suspended in ethanol, and let's assume it was pure ethanol. Let's just say pure ethanol. This is the comment I wrote. If it was pure ethanol, then the concentration that we actually have to give to the plant for this Grow Genius silica is 3 mil per 100 litres. Very, very concentrated. So I actually wrote the comment and said, it's actually at 3%, isn't it? Waiting for a correction, because obviously 3 mil into 100 litres is actually 0.003%. I was waiting for the correction so that we could jump on and say exactly, very, very dilute. The ethanol, if it was pure, would be at 0.003 percentage. So it's not going to have any effect on the plant if it was pure ethanol, and it's not pure ethanol. So you've jumped the gun a little bit. There's plenty of scientific data to back up monosilicic acid, the Grow Genius, and it's sort of, you've just jumped the gun, but in a way he's done a good thing, because he's given exposure to this good silicic acid, monosilicic acid that's very cheap but very, very concentrated as well. So expect good things from that product. Right, I've cleared up everything. I've cleared up my mistakes from last week. We've talked a little bit about what's been going on in the industry. Let's start with hand watering systems, okay? So I believe the vast majority of growers in the UK are hand feeders. It's simple, easy to make adjustments, and cheap. If you're hand feeder, you'll probably be using soil, cocoa, or a blend of amendments and cocoa like perlite or pebbles. So I'm going to go over also what I said last week, so that anyone that's just joining for the first time on this podcast, welcome. And we'll go over what we spoke about briefly last week. So watering plants is called irrigation. Watering plants with nutrients is called fertigation. So just for ease of simplicity, then if I say irrigate, or when you irrigate your plants, I'm saying just water, nothing else, just water. If I say fertigate, then it's your nutrient mix that you've made up with your AEBs, your boosters, and your PKs. Now, we said this last week, there's some debate on whether to fertigate every time or to mix fertigation which is water and nutrients, with irrigation, just water. If you get runoff every time you feed, then our advice is that you can happily feed every time. You don't really need to flush or irrigate with water, because what you're doing when you get runoff, you're pushing those residual salts that build up at the bottom of the pot out of the pot, and they're not allowed to build up. If you don't get the runoff, then if you're feeding with EC1, you're in week 2, week 3 of veg, you're feeding EC1, and you continue to do that for, let's just say, 2 weeks. If you don't get runoff and you've got a room that's maybe slightly warm, then those salts, the water will evaporate, the salts will build up. And if you actually measure the EC, if you do some runoff, you could probably find your EC to be in the 1.5 to 1.8 range, depending on how much water's evaporated. So if you don't get runoff, your salts can build up and you can overfeed your plants. So it's beneficial to make sure you're getting runoff every time. If for some reason you don't or have never fed till runoff, then once every 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to be good to just irrigate. Irrigate with water until you get runoff, push those salts out of the bottom of the pot, and you're going to have a much cleaner product. You're going to have a plant that's not being overfed, and you're going to get a much healthier plant. Because when you overfeed plants, it's that motorway. You're putting lots of cars on the motorway. You're going to get build up of nutrients, and certain nutrients can't get to the plant. So flushing every now and again with water is a really good technique to get a good quality end product and make sure that your plant stays as healthy as possible. So that's basically it. If you get runoff, happy days. If you don't get runoff, it's good to give them a little bit of irrigation with just water. Now, if you're new to sort of feeding and you don't get runoff, about a 10 to 15% runoff is good. If you water with 10 litres of water, having about a litre come out the bottom is quite good, and you'll know that you're pushing out the excess salts, but you're not just absolutely drenching the plant. Make sure you don't have a build-up of salts, and then you can check the EC as well. If you gather some water at the bottom, you can check the EC in the root zone, you can check the pH in the root zone, and you can get an idea of what's going on in your plant, rather than just what you're feeding it. Because what you feed it with pH and EC is most of the time very different to the pH and EC in the root zone. So it's a good thing to get overwatered to make sure you get runoff. Now, one of the big things that I want to pick up on and point out is that there's no such thing as overwatering. If you've been listening for a long time, or you're a DWC grower, then you'll know I'm a big fan of DWC, and you'll also know it's impossible to overwater. DWC, deep water culture, roots are suspended in water constantly, but they're oxygenated. There's plenty of oxygen there. So there's no such thing as overwatering, just a lack of oxygen at the root zone. You need to make sure that you feed your plant in line with how much water it needs. If you have a small plant, feeding 4 times a day will remove oxygen and suffocate the plant. If you have a huge plant, feeding once will lead to underwatering and wilting. So you've got to be plant specific. How big's your plant? What's your environment saying? This is where VPD comes into its own, because you can see, or you can at least look at a graph on the vapor pressure deficits in the plant. If there's a lot of transpiration, you'll need to feed more often, because it's going to take up that water. You'll also need to feed slightly less nutrients, because it's going to take up much more nutrients. If the VPD means that the plant is low transpiring a small amount, then you will need to just feed less often, but with a higher EC. So when the plant does drink and does feed, it's getting the nutrients that it needs. This is another one. It seems a little bit simple, but it's something that we think we have to say. If the plant is small in a big pot, the media is going to hold a lot of water and suffocate the plants. Plant to pot size is absolutely crucial. It seems like a basic technique, but we see customers coming in, we get questions coming in every day. And what a lot of people do, if you've got a 50-litre pot and a plant that's the size of a litre bottle of water or 500ml bottle of water, then what people tend to do is they feed the media, they feed the cocoa, they feed the soil. They're not feeding the plant. And we all do it. It's a natural thing to do. If you've got a 50-litre pot full of cocoa or soil and a small plant, you will water that cocoa until the cocoa looks wet. You don't tend to water so that you're giving the plant what it needs. And that's it's a massive mistake, because You're going to overwater. You're going to saturate the media. If the plant's small, it's got a small root system, it's not going to be able to take up that water. You're going to absolutely suffocate the plant with oxygen, and you're just going to have a nightmare with it. So don't water your media, water your plant, and make sure that plant to pot size is spot on. And then that sort of brings us on to top feeding versus bottom feeding. What is the right way? So I'm going to sort of see what you all do. If you hand feed, do you top feed or do you bottom feed? Now, there is no right way to hand feed a plant. There's a way that's right for you, but they each have their advantages and disadvantages. If you top feed, then the advantages are that you can push residual salts out the bottom, you can get runoff, you can measure EC and pH of your runoff, and you can have a good assessment of what's going on in the root zone. If you bottom feed, you can give each plant exactly what it needs. So with top feeding, if you have 20 plants, most people will make up 100 litres, or they'll make up an amount of water with the feed. They will take their 2 litre measuring jug and they might go around to every plant and give it 2 litres of water. Now, if I got 20 people in this room, they wouldn't all drink and eat the exact amount of food and water. They would have the amounts that's right for them. Plants are exactly the same. They want to eat and drink what's right for them. When you bottom feed a plant and you stick around for a little bit, you can see which plants have taken up that water straight away and could do with a little bit more. You can see the plants that have just about taken it, and you know that they're quite happy. You don't want to give them any more, and you don't want to give them any less. And then you can see the plants where they're just sat in water, and then you're going to have to get rid of that water in the bottom of the tray so that you don't suffocate or overwater. We'll have to use that word. So bottom feeding allows you to give individual plants exactly what they need and when they need it. And that's where an AutoPot system comes in really handy, because that is a bottom-fed gravity system. So that's where that technique comes from. So bottom feeding, several benefits. We treat each plant as an individual. And we, just to give you an insight, I was going to say I'm a bottom feeder, but that doesn't sound great. Probably have all kinds of people talking about me saying Steve told everyone he's a bottom feeder. I like to feed plants from the bottom. That's a much better thing to say. And I prefer it because one of the negatives of feeding from the top, in my opinion, have you ever fed from the top and after about 3 or 4 weeks, towards the end of veg, you filled your pot with cocoa at the beginning, and there's about 3 or 4 inches of cocoa missing from the top, and you think, where has that gone? It feels like somebody's robbing your cocoa from your pots, the little scabs. But that's not what's happening. You've been feeding through the top, and if you don't feed lightly, and you feed quite heavily and just throw the water on them, it pushes the cocoa down. You're compressing the cocoa. When you compress the cocoa, you push all of the air pockets out the media, and it's less chance for the plants or the roots to get the oxygen that they need. So you end up with a compressed cocoa brick, less oxygen, and then essentially you've got to water more often because the media compressed can't hold as much water. So that's one of the negatives of top feeding, and that's why we ended up, me personally, we go to bottom fed plants. Top tip for bottom feeding is to occasionally irrigate through the top of the plant. This is because one of the side effects of bottom feeding is, I really need to come up with a better name than bottom feeding because it makes me cringe every time I say it. Irrigate from the lowest points of the plant. I'm not happy with saying bottom feeding all the times. So irrigating from the bottom is, you're going to have a buildup of salts. And the way to get around that is to very occasionally, once every 4 weeks, is feed from the top so that you push all the salts out of the bottom of the plant, and you're not going to get the buildup of salts at the bottom of the plant. The other reason is, I've recently found out that on a root structure, the bottom of the plants are where nutrients, the fine hairs are where nutrients are taken up. You get a middle section of the root that takes up nutrients and air, and you get the top section of a root system that is very good at taking in the oxygen. But all parts of the roots will all do the same job. So if a plant root dries out, the fine hairs, and you've got a good root system when you've got hundreds, if not thousands of fine hairs, that's where all the work's done. You need to keep them moist. So if you can just occasionally feed a tiny amount through the top, keep that top layer of roots moist but not saturated, and do most of your feeding through your bottom, you're going to have some really good results. I want to know who's top feeding, who's bottom feeding. Let us know in the comments. If you listen on the podcast, send us a message to @NPK Live on Instagram and let us know what you do with your top or bottom feeding. So I'm off the screen now. I'm going to start looking at the comments again and see what everyone's up to. So just hello to Fire in the Booth Farms. Nice one for joining us. The Bud fellas, he said, see the AutoPots though, would you say leave the tap on all the time? So with AutoPots, I'm about to start talking about the AutoPot system, but it's a great question because a lot of people misuse the AutoPot system. If you are in AutoPots and you're brand new to it, or even if you're experienced AutoPot grower, you want to irrigate, you want to feed from the top, you want to hand feed from the top until the roots hit the bottom. When the roots hit the bottom, you can turn the tap onto the reservoir through your filter so that you don't clog up the lines. Me personally, I would turn the tap on so that you're irrigating the plants. And then for the first few days, if not weeks, I would turn that tap off and let them have a proper dry period. And then you are, for the last week of veg, first few weeks of flower while they're starting to get the flowering sites, starting to get through that stress period, I would make sure that I'm there to irrigate. When you get to about week 3 of flower, I'd say the roots are well developed, the plant's in full flow, the plant is transpiring a lot now because you'll have all of your lights on, the temperatures will be where they're going to be, and you tend to need to feed a lot more often. So then the tap goes on and you leave it on permanently. Maybe once in that cycle and before you start your flush, I would turn the tap off, maybe give it a good run through with water, and then start feeding with I'd start fertigating again, which is your water with nutrients. But great question. That's where everyone messes up on AutoPots. They just think, put the small plant in, turn the tap on, and leave it. And that's why people have problems with AutoPots, because they misuse them. Fire in the Boot says, with top feeding, would you say an even feed with Lima Floraflex is much better than a dripper on a stake? So Floraflex, I think we had a little chat last week, didn't we, on the Q&As. Floraflex is a massive system in the US. All the US listeners will definitely know about Floraflex, and a lot of people are starting to hear about Floraflex and use it in the UK, but some of the components are still quite hard to get hold of. But an even feed with a Floraflex is much better than a dripper on a stake. I'd say Floraflex would beat a dripper on a stake, just because it's a much more established system. It is the dripper system that money can buy. So I'd probably say the Floraflex would be just 6mm pipe onto a straight dripper. But if you are using drippers, we talk about drippers on a little bit later on in the podcast. Octomitters, I would love every dripper grower to get onto an octomitter. A little bit more expensive, but you're going to get much better results. It's called octomitter on stake, and you can literally change the top dial so you can water 1 liter per hour or 7 liters per hour. You can change and dictate to the plant what it's going to get fed. Let's see what everyone on YouTube's been saying. So Ian Collins, he's on his way home. Wish I was a partner with a big thumbs up. Everyone wishes they were a partner on this podcast. But to be fair, Can Filters are the partner of the podcast. But Ian Collins, if you don't know, is Global Air Supplies. And what we said to all of our partners is that this podcast became successful, and we do believe it's successful because the amount of subscribers and followers that we have on the podcast is because we're real and we talk shit about shit products, and we sell a good product when it's a good product. And we told all the partners that we would not talk about other good products just because they're partners, and that's what keeps the podcast real, and that's what keeps everyone listening, because we're not dictated to by our partners. We genuinely believe our partners are fantastic products. I wouldn't have a partner on the podcast if they were shit. Having said all that, Global Air Supplies, who do fans and filters, fantastic products. They are, in my opinion, the Rolls-Royce and Can Filters are the Bentley. They are the top-notch fans and filters that you can get in the UK and also in Europe and around the world. But just thought to give that shout out and keep it real, because Global Air Supplies do phenomenal fans and filters, EC and AC. Rolls-Royce and Bentley, they're up there with the best. Emma said, looking forward to the AutoPot podcast. So it's not, just before anyone gets overexcited about a systems podcast with AutoPot, it's literally, we don't talk about AutoPot that much. We talk about a little bit about the state of the industry. I'll give you a sneak peek. We talk a lot about cannabis because Jason is in South America. He's consultant. He's going to the MJ Biz, which is in Vegas in December, the biggest cannabis conference in the world. And we talk quite a bit about that and the UK situation. So it's definitely a podcast. It won't be live. It'll be on YouTube to listen to, but it's going to force all of you live listeners and watchers to get on the podcast and actually download it. Keep my figures looking good. Raccoon said, you should do a clap. It makes a specific sound wave that's easy to see when editing. We don't do any editing. We literally do no editing for this live podcast. That's why it's a little bit off the cuff, a little bit. We definitely, so for everyone that's watching on YouTube, everyone that's watching on Instagram, and the same people that tune in every week, and we absolutely love you all for it. And because of you constantly tuning in every week, it's worth us spending the money to make the production value much better. So a little tiny change that we made for people watching live is you had a little bit of music that we created. NPK Media created that music with Coatsy Beats and a starter screen. So just rather than just it going blank, there's a bit of music for you to listen to that we've created. And the production value for next year from about February and March will be up again. So please keep watching. The production value is definitely going to go up in value, and you will get a much better quality podcast out of it. Tweedledee said, only thing missing off this show is Dana White sitting next to you. CANNA equals best food ever. Explode. So he's on about Dutch Pro Explode equals wow. Two fantastic products. Peter's was on with us 3 weeks ago. He's just said, thank you for clearing up that little thing with Instagram. Aimer420 said, I haven't been getting run off there in BioBizormix. So brilliant comment, because in soil, it's not super necessary to get runoff because you should be feeding with a soil nutrient. There definitely should be a load of microbes in there, and they can help break down salt and make sure that the plant, so we talk about cation exchange capacity, that is the ability of your media to hold on to nutrients and to give them to the plant when they want them, and to hold on to them when the plant doesn't want them. Soil has a really high cation exchange capacity. So even though it might be good to very occasionally do a bit of a runoff just to make sure everything's clean, it's not that essential when you're growing soil. Brilliant comment, because I didn't mention it. And so that's if you're a soil grower. Green Meanie said, give them a bit more water, which is, it's very difficult with soil and organics because it's a different way of growing. But it's another podcast. I am actually reading a book at the moment. It's thick. So I'm about to show the people watching live like how thick it is, and it brings no value if you're listening on the podcast, but it's a thick book and it's taken a long time to get through, but it's one of the best books I've read on organics. So once I've read that whole book, I'm going to get a guest on that's just top notch with his organic growing, and we're going to come with a really good organic podcast for everyone. You deserve it. And 420, you know what, I love the people commenting and the people watching live, because you're not just asking questions, you're giving good advice to other people asking questions. 420 M Funk says, runoff really important in cocoa, not so much in soil. So that's really good. Shrimps and lobsters are bottom feeders, I know, and I quite like shrimps and lobsters, but I don't want people going around saying that Steve's a bottom feeder, and then Peter comes in, boom, reverse irrigation. That is the new word. You will no longer hear me say bottom feeder ever again, unless you actually are a bottom feeder, and then it's been an insult. Peter, reverse irrigation. That is the new word for bottom feeding. Well done, thank you. Raccoon Hand said, I know AutoPot recommend cocoa, but I know there's a lot of Americans using super soil and only using water in the AutoPot. Absolutely spot on. So AutoPots can actually handle a massive range of media, 60-40, cocoa. I'm not pebbles. Don't ever just use pebbles in AutoPot. You'll fuck it up. But soil, definitely super soil with just water is working really well. I've heard that as well. Don't know how many people in the UK are trying that, because super soils just seem to be emerging in the UK at the moment. EcoThrive have got their super soil. that's doing really well, and expect it to build and become better and better in 2020. But yeah, absolutely spot on comment. Tweedledee said bioponic flush, OMG. Yep, I know, because so for flushing, we're still on systems. We're not getting too carried away this week. When you flush and you're hand feeding, or if you're in a system, there's two types of flushes. There's three types of flushes. You can just do a water flush, which is just going to remove salts and will do it a good job. You've just got to flush a little bit more than you would do with the next product, which is a mineral salt remover. It breaks down the salts, allows them to be dissolved into the water, and it's going to just speed up that flush process. The third one, which is where bioponic flush comes into its own, it's not so much a flush, but a finishing product. And it will help break down salts, but it's also a little bit of a feed for the plant. So what their theory and ethos is, you've just spent 8 to 12 to 16 weeks growing this plant, as much minerals as the plant can take, as much organics as the plant can take, and all of a sudden, you're just going to give it water. You're going to stress it out, but that could be what you want to achieve good colours and good terpene production. But a lot of people, that will affect yield as well. So if you're after yield, bioponic flush is basically your tea and biscuits for your grandparents. It's weaning them off the food, getting them ready to finish, and it's a very good product, and you do get very good results. 420 said bottom drawer, but he doesn't know if that sounds any better. It definitely does sound better than bottom feeding, but reverse irrigation is still winning the day with the technique. And Lotus Rue says, I found the AutoPot system works better with the easy feed timer. So the easy feed timer could work for the early stages when you sort of on and off with the irrigation. But worldwide, it said they don't tend to use timers, and it's the biggest selling point of AutoPots. The minimum amount of water you use, so you're actually saving the world when you use AutoPots. You use less nutrients because the plant's using up everything that you're giving it. You're not flushing anything away. And the plant dictates when it wants the feed. So if the plant's hungry, it will take up that water. If you saturated the media, it's not going to be sitting in water, because AutoPots, people think that they'll just constantly sat in water. It will actually drain to the bottom and will not refill until absolutely every bit of water is gone. So it does give you a really good dry period. And that's one of the biggest selling features of the AutoPot. But if you use an easy feed time, you get good results. Stick with it. 420 said, I top feed everything on trays to run off. I've got 2 and 30 litre pots, which are top feed until I see a tiny bit of runoff. Then I fill a pot tray with reverse osmosis water to avoid salt buildup. Good technique. I like that. And he said, you guys are fair and balanced, which is why I watched. Thank you very much. Live equals raw equals real. Yeah. So if you ask me a question and I haven't got a clue, I might stutter and go, or I'll just say I don't know, which is, I would just say I don't know, because it means, I love it when you ask me a question, because then I'll go home and do a bit of research, and it's always good to find stuff you don't know. The Bud Fellas on Instagram said, what's the best product you found this year? Ooh, one out the blue there, best product this year. And there's definitely, I know that there's definitely a best product that's come out this year, and it's on the tip of my tongue. Leave it with me and it'll come to me as we're doing the podcast. But we're going to move on. We're not going to stray too much and get into the Q&As. We're going to move on to the AutoPot system. So the AutoPot system, let's get me notes here. It's the daddy of bottom feeding systems. But we're not going to call it bottom feed anymore. Reverse irrigation, as Peter's now patented and copyrighted. Gravity fed, no electricity, gives the plant what she needs when she needs it. Brilliant. How do you use the system? So we've talked a little bit about how to use the system, but setting up the system, that's not really recommended for a podcast. What you need to do is go and find AutoPot on YouTube. They've got plenty of videos on how to set it up. You'll be using 6mm pipe, 6mm pipe, 16 to 6mm cross connectors, and you can arrange your pots in any way that you need to, depending on where your lights are. So the AutoPot works on a wicking mechanism. What that means is the media will absorb the water and will make its way up through capillary action to as far up as the plant, as the wicking mechanism can take it. So make sure you're using media that has good wick and action. You'll know that it's got that because you'll need cocoa with strands in. So if you find a cocoa that is just, it looks gorgeous, it's just pure brown, looks like brown gold, and it's great for certain, maybe top feeding, and it's great for maybe some other systems. But in a wicking system, you want to make sure you've got those strands so that it wicks as efficiently as possible. Thin strands of cocoa, short and long, um, but you'll also want amendments, pebbles, perlite to keep the root zone oxygenated. So my experience in AutoPots, 60-40 works really well in AutoPots. Make sure you always add a layer of pebbles at the bottom before you add your media to help with drainage. So if you've got cocoa at the bottom, what it can do is it can block those holes and keep hold of too much water. If you've got a nice layer of pebbles, just one layer, half an inch to an inch, then it means that the water can drain freely and there's plenty of pockets of air to make sure that the roots have got plenty of oxygen. Top feed for this first 10 to 14 days until the roots are established and hitting the bottom, and then turn the tap on from the reservoir to the system. Let the system fully irrigate, turn the tap off, monitor how quickly the plants are taking up the water and the nutrients, and then you'll be able to jockey how quick you can turn the tap on full time, or whether you need to just let them continue to have that dry period while they establish more into flowering. Make sure that your nutrients are clean. Nothing too thick or nutrients that tend to separate can clog your line. So what people don't realize is AutoPot have recently made a valve that very rarely will clog or block, but the 6 mil line, water is going to sit in that, and because it's black, and if the room's hot, the nutrients can separate from the water if it's thick and gloopy or organic. So if you want to use amendments that are more organic or more thick and viscous, then you can make up a separate feed. Make up your reservoir with water so that you can irrigate from the bottom. And then you can actually top feed for, if you want to just use it for once a month, you can top feed with your organic or your fancy new boosts and PKs that are thick and gloopy. You can actually top feed them. Jason is quite funny because I was on the phone to him talking about this, and he said, yeah, if you want to use all those silly boosters and silly extra gloopy PKs and this and that, then do this. Jason's not a fan. He's a big fan of GHE, or he's a big fan of 3-part nutrients. And that is your grow, your bloom, your micro. You alternate the grow and the bloom and the micro, depending on whether you want more PK, more nitrogen, more micronutrients. And he's a true believer in that's all you need. And there's a lot of fancy products that he's not a fan of. And we're thinking about getting a podcast with him live from the MJ Biz. So if we do, then we'll make sure he gets, because he does do quite a rant on gloopy, shitty things, unneeded products. So we'll get him to do a little bit of a rant on that. Use a line cleaner with AutoPots. The CANNA line cleaner is called, you could use CANNA Flush and CANNA Zymes. That'll help break down dead roots. It'll help break down salts and make sure that you're not clogging up your system. And that will make sure that you're not going to get any blockages. The plants then don't get fed. And if you're not on the ball, the first thing you know about it is just the plants wilting. So using a line cleaner can help prevent that. Make sure your reservoir is about 15 centimeters above the highest float valve for proper gravity pressure. So people will just put the reservoir on the same level as the base trays and the valves, and they don't tend to get the full use out of their 100 or 225 or 400 litre flexi. Make sure your reservoir is about 15 centimeters above the float valve, and you get proper gravity pressure pushing as much of that water through as possible. At the end of your system, at the end of your 16 mil line, put a 16 mil tap. Every few weeks, let about half a litre per pot. So if you're in a 24 pot system, you're going to let 12 litres of water flush through. Do this with line cleaner, and that'll help prevent mineral deposits as well. And in winter, if the floor can basically be one of the coldest places in your room, if you've got your pots, and this just isn't AutoPots, this is AutoPots, flood and drain, DWC. If your pots are on a concrete floor, then it's going to get really cold. So make sure if you're in the AutoPot system or any system, use a piece of carpet or foam underneath each pot, and this will prevent the water and the roots from getting too cold. You'll know your plants are getting too cold because you get purple stem. Purple stem is because phosphorus really struggles in cold conditions. The plant can't uptake phosphorus when the water's cold or the media's cold. And when the plant doesn't uptake phosphorus, the plant struggles to move sugar around itself. And what you see is the purpling is basically sugar deposits within the plant, and that's what the purple color comes from. So if you get purple stems, look at you've got the water's too cold, or the media's too cold, or your pots are on the floor. So that's a good top tip for if you get purple stems. So that's AutoPot. But any questions on AutoPot, make sure you get them in. And we'll be moving on to flood and drain systems in a sec while I read these comments. So one of the comments, the most appealing thing to me about AutoPot systems is no motors, no pumps, no electricity, and 100% reduces the risk of equipment failure. So it is one of the biggest selling points of the AutoPot. You're not going to have pump failure. So in the system that we're about to talk about next, flood and drain, and most of the systems requires electricity. If your electricity goes down, your plants are going to go down most of the time within 24 to 48 hours and probably be dead within 3 or 4 days. JK Triple G said hello and said CANNA will do that? ? So no, CANNA, I know what you're getting at. I've sort of hinted that CANNA can act as a flush, but if you are running sort of CANNA flush or a line cleaner through your system, then CANNA can help break down dead roots. So if you go onto CANNA's YouTube channel or type in CANNA apple, what's it called now? Apple chutney or apple sauce or whatever it is that people put on pork. CANNA on apple sauce. You actually see the CANNA break down the big chunks, and basically they put it through a mesh. You can see all the water come through, and it's just a good way to show how CANNA works. And then 420 said if you put a bit of paper in pure CANNA, it'll dissolve in 24 hours. I've never tried that. That would be a good thing to do on a video. I might actually do that for Instagram and show how CANNA works. Good shout out. I'll give you a little message me as well. If you've got an Instagram, message me. I'll give you a shout out. Fat Farmers 420 is dealing with blocked drippers right now. We're going to be talking about drippers a little bit later on, or potentially on next week's podcast if we don't get to it, because there's a lot of systems to talk about. Why I don't know. Someone's basically text messaged me because you don't know if he wants to be shouted out. But he said apple chutney ? I couldn't think apple sauce. It's apple sauce, all right, Canal. Why has everyone suddenly got so aggy with me over the last few weeks and make a mistake and you all jump on me? Apple sauce. Let me know if I can shout you out because you've private messaged me, and I don't know if that's because you don't want me to shout you out or you want to stay under the radar. What else? What other questions have we got? Fire in the Booth Farm said, what's your view on living soils? So how can I make living soils about systems? A system of life? We might get away with that one. So I haven't used a living soil yet. I'm really interested in using the EcoThrive living soil. EcoThrive living soil, you throw it into 40 to 50 litre pot, just add water. There's some amendments you can add, and I've had nothing but rave reviews about it. So I'm really looking forward. I just need to find, to be honest, I might do it in the media office. I might get a tomato plant, not give it much care and attention, and just use super soil and see what's happening. I'll be able to give you some feedback. Joe said, what do you reckon on the new Gavita LEDs? I think anything that Gavita does is going to be good. They very rarely, apart from a little period about 2017 when they went through a period of a lot of returns, Gavita don't tend to do shit because they're too big. They're too big a company. They can't afford to make shit products because people would get onto it and stop buying them. So I haven't used one because they are just new out in the UK, but there's a lot of hype around them, and I think they'll probably do very well. But there is a lot of stiff competition. You've got Maxi Bright's new LED, which looks very similar. You've got Lumitech's new LED, which looks very similar. You've got the Fluent Spider, and then you've got the Gavita. A lot of LEDs, all from good manufacturers. So there's going to be some good competition. That's why I'm excited for 2020 with LEDs, because the competition is going to be stiff. The price is going to come down because it's going to have to. The technology is going to improve. This summer for LEDs is going to be really good. So do your research. I said this last year. Start doing your research now, because you're going to spend a good amount of money. Make sure you're spending your money in the right place. Growing Around said best product this year, Grow Genius monosilicic acid. It very, very well could be the best product of the year because of the price, because of the concentration, because silica is my favorite element of all time. Yeah, I am a proper geek, and that is a real nerdy thing to say, but it is. And let's do this product of all time. So first of all, help me out. What are all your favorite products of 2019? What's new? It's hard because a lot of products that have come to people's attention this year are products from 2019. They're products from 2017 that have had 2 years worth of promotions and marketing and just come to people's attention 2019. So Grow Genius is definitely up there, but it's been around for many, many years in agriculture. But it's a new product for the hydro industry for 2019. So it's definitely up there for best product of the year. What else could we have? What else? To be honest, you know what? Predatory mites. They've been around for like millions of years, but predatory mites have every customer that's taken a predatory mite from us has just come back and said, wow. So if you're using predatory mites, then and you think that they're not working, it's because you're not looking hard enough. And I made the same mistake. I saw the shells of spider mites on the tomato plant and didn't pay much attention to them. I thought, had a little look and thought, bastard, they're still there. And when I went back and looked again, I thought, they're still there. They're not moving at all. Flick them and they just fall off the leaf. And these predators suck the life out of the spider mites or the thrips or whatever it is you're trying to get rid of and leave the shells. So don't be mistaken. You'll see the shells, they'll die. You just need to knock them off and give the plant a good spray with some foliar feed, and it'll basically push them all off. Grow Genius has joined. Welcome to the podcast. We've actually been talking about yourselves, talking about the unnamed Instagrammer who jumped the gun a little bit and thought that ethanol was bad for plants. He's correct, but not in the 0.0003% concentration that is probably in is in Grow Genius when it's diluted, and not the derivative. So welcome, and hope you're doing all right with your launch. Hope everything's going okay. Grow Genius just commented saying, if you've ever had spider mites in the past, you want to use biocontrol as a preventative too, by the way. Brilliant comment. Not just if you have pests, to prevent yourself from getting pests, throw predators on there. They'll have a good mooch around your plant for, you know what, I don't know how long they would try and look for food. If there's no food available, they do tend to move about, but there's that many of them. Basically spider mites and thrips can't take control, but you do get a good 4 to 5 weeks of pest prevention by using predators. What else have we had? Fire Boot said, my mate is using EcoThrive, but said in flour it needs more food. So EcoThrive sell an amendment. It's really cheap. You top dress it. And the reason that they do the amendment is if some flower cycles are short flower cycles. If you've got a long flower cycle of 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, you'll need to add the amendment a little bit into flour, make sure that they're getting all the nutrients they need. So tell your mate to go and get the amendment that comes from EcoThrive if he's doing a long flower cycle. What else have we got? Mammoth P, brilliant product, but has been out for a good few years now. I think that was like top product 2018 in the UK. And Organicus works at treating soil. Yeah, I'm using Organicus on all of the house plants in the media office. They all look great. Yeah, big fan of Organicus. So let's move on. I don't know how long we're in. We're probably about just over an hour in. So what we will do for the remainder of this podcast, we'll talk about flood and drain systems and Next week will be DWC, NFT, drippers, run to waste. I'll do a bit of a refresh on ECPHs, water oxygenation, all that sort of stuff. If you're interested in oxygenation of water, we've just been talking about it on our Instagram at NPK _hydroponics. Get involved in the conversation there. So, sipping my water, flood and drain systems, and continue to ask you questions if you've got any. So, flood and drain. Some of you old bastards. I'm just about a young bastard, 32. You'll know them as ebb and flow. Ebb and flow, flood and drain, same type of system. Potentially the most used mechanical system in the UK, if not the world. It works by having a reservoir, a brain, an inner, and an outer pot. The brain, on a timer, will pull water from the reservoir, push it through to the pots, and then after a set time, drain it, returns it to the reservoir. And the nature of flood and drain systems means that as it floods, it pushes stale air out. As it drains, it will pull fresh oxygen, fresh air into the root zone. And that's the basics of how a flood and drain works. Flood and drains are very complex. It could, to be honest, it could do with a guest who manufactures a flood and drain system to come and talk about it, to talk about the ins and outs of setting it up and how to get the best from it. But we'll go over some elements here. So, several models of flood and drain systems. The two best known are the Multiflow, which is in its V3 version, and the IWS, or Intelligent Watering System, which is another flood and drain system. Before I move on, Instagram, you're about to go off in 10 seconds. So, because we've had an hour, and Instagram likes to kick me off. So, as soon as we go off, if you want to rejoin, it'll be back on in 5 seconds. Thank you very much for joining. And then this is the problem with Instagram. So we'll share that to the story so people who didn't make it can watch it later. And we will go live again. Yeah, fuck you, Instagram. I'm just going to go live again. Thank you, YouTube, for being a proper social media site for live streaming. Anyway, back to the flood and drain system. So there's two models, V3, Multiflow, RWS. There are other systems, but they're the best systems that you can get your hands on, in my opinion. They both work very similarly. It's probably down to your own preference which one that you get. And one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you for what system you go for in terms of flood and drain is go with the system, firstly, that you know and you can use well. If you've never used a system before, then if any of your friends have got a system, then you've got constant access to someone who can help. But if you haven't got any friends, a bit like me, you're a bit of a weirdo and you work too much, and you've never used a flood and drain system before, go to the shop and let them give you the flood and drain system that they want to give you. If they want to sell you a V3 Multiflow system, let them give you the V3 Multiflow system, because if you try and buy an IWS because for some reason you think it's better, then the shop probably doesn't know as much about IWS as it does about V3 Multiflow. And when you come to ask advice about IWS, the shop's not going to be in a position to give you the best possible advice. And the same around, if the shop wants to give you IWS, don't push them to give you V3, because when a shop wants to sell you system, it's probably, with systems, it's probably because they know more about that system and can give you better advice and help, and maybe customer service with that system as well. So do be led a little bit by the shop on what system they want to sell. But in my opinion, I am biased because SANlight basically sell the V3 system. The V2 Multiflow and the IWS Pro were very similar. I personally think that the V3 Multiflow edges it because they have something called intelligent flood cycle. So with the IWS, it's too complicated to really get into the nitty-gritty of flooding, time and drain, and watch a YouTube video. It'll be much easier to understand. But with V3 Multiflow, it's got something called intelligent watering, or a learning cycle. That's the proper word. It's got a learning cycle. So it will know how long it takes to flood, keeps it there for a certain amount of time, and will drain, and remembers that figure so that you don't have to start doing all this remembering, timing on your phone, clicking segments off. It's just a much easier system to use. And that's my opinion. But there's hot debate on that one. I will probably be slandered because I've said that, but it's just an opinion. It's not hard fact on that one. When you're setting up the system, really good top tip, have some boiled water close to hand so you can dip the pipework into it. It's got two benefits. One, hot water, boiling water softens up the pipe. So when you're pushing it onto the fixtures, it's really easy to slide on. The second benefit is as the pipe cools, it shrinks over the fittings that you've put it onto and really creates a really nice watertight seal so you're not going to get any leaks. So that's brilliant top tip for when you're setting up systems. So the flood cycle in a flood and drain is made up of three elements. You have your flood frequency. This is how often you flood the pot, which depends on the grow media you're using and how well established your plants are. You've got the flood height. This is how high the water rises up on your pot, and you want to aim to flood to the maximum height in most cases. You don't want the water to come above the media, but you don't want it to just flood to 1/3. You want to make sure you're covering most of that media. And flood duration. This is the total amount of time each feed cycle. This is the total time of each feed cycle and will depend on the number of pots in your system and the grow media used. So FF, flood frequency, depends on the stage of plant growth, the type of media, and the environment. If you're in pebbles, you're going to have to irrigate a lot more frequently compared to cocoa because pebbles don't hold that much water. So if you need to flood every 3 to 4 hours when small, once every 3 hours once they're established, and in cocoa you probably flood once a day when young and up to 2 to 4 times a day in peak flower. You should flood about 1 to 2 hours after the light's on, and the last flood should be 1 hour before lights off. So the reason for that bottom one, flood once 1 to 2 hours after lights are on. You don't want plants immediately sat in water as soon as they wake up. They probably will have a little bit of water left over from the previous flood cycle. Allow them to take that up before you start battering them with more flood cycles. And then the last flood should be an hour before the lights come off. So as you flood it, if you're in 60-40, it's going to hold a lot of water. You don't want to flood that cocoa so it's full of water and then turn the lights off. So the plants stop drinking, transpiration massively reduced, and the heat goes as well. So it's just going to be sat in water. Water will get chilled and it can create problems in your plants as well. The flood duration. So when you first set up the systems, you need to know how long to flood for to initiate a flood cycle. So you need to time how long it takes to fully fill, and then initiate the drain function. This is on the IWS and a few other flood and drain systems. The amount of time elapsed is the time you should set on the flood duration timers and allow a few extra minutes. So if you're in pebbles, you need to allow the water to remain there for at least a few minutes so that you make sure that the water are able to take up the nutrients in the water. If it's warm and dry, you need to flood more frequently, and the vice versa in cooler, more humid environments. So really, flood and drain, brilliant system, can really oxygenate the root zone. You dictate what the plant needs. So you need to be what we call a plant whisperer. You need to be taking very close care and attention on how much water, how much nutrients the plant needs. If you're in pebbles, they don't hold any water, flood and drain more often. If you're in 60-40, the cocoa will hold more water and you don't have to flood as often. The benefit of pebbles is that it's a much better media to use for results because you're flooding more often. You're replenishing the pH, the EC, the oxygen. Everything is much better in just pebbles, but there's a big downfall to pebbles. If your timer breaks or anything goes wrong, a plant in pebbles has no insurance policy, has no safety barrier. So if anything goes wrong with the pump, within 12 hours, they'll start to wilt. Within 24 hours, they're probably looking really shit. And within 36 to 48 hours, you've probably got a dead plant on your hand. And it could even be within 6 hours. If it's in a hot room with high transpiration, low humidity, you could have a dead plant within 6 hours if your pump starts to fail and you can't flood your plants properly. So most growers will go for a 60-40 because if your pump does fail, then at least the cocoa can retain some water and can retain some nutrients. So if you can't get there for 12, 24 hours, you've got a bit of a safety net. You've got a bit of an insurance policy with 60-40. But again, if the temperatures are high, transpiration's high, humidity's low, then even in some 60-40, you could have a dead plant on your hand within 18 hours. So it's really important to make sure that in a flood and drain system, you're paying attention to the plants, paying attention to your system, and making sure that you're there quite often so that if anything does go wrong, you're going to resolve it straight away. A top system tip is if you suspect you've got a blockage, when the system starts to empty or when the system is empty, pour 4 or 5 litres into each pot. Monitor how long it takes to drain. If 1 or 2 pots take the time, you've got a blockage in those pots. So make sure no roots have made the way down the piping and then do a cycle with some nutrient line cleaner. So if you're in a flood and drain system, empty, fill with 4 or 5 litres of water, keep an eye on how quick they're draining. And if you can spot 1, 2 or a few that are just not draining, they're the pots that you've got the plug in or the blockage in, and you can start to make changes to that one. These systems also tend to come with copper Manix discs. Copper repels root growth and will stop the roots from growing into lines and causing these blockages. So make sure you're always using your copper Manix discs. So we are on 71 minutes. I'm going to do part 2 of systems next week, which will be DWC, which is deep water culture. We'll go into reverse deep water culture, the NFT system, the dripper system, run to waste, and then we'll have a bit of a refresh on EC, pH, temperatures, and oxygenation for all these systems, rather than babbling on for hours on this podcast. Let's go through some of the bits of comments. Indica Head Shop said, organic living soils need time for the nutrients and amendments to break down. This can be mistaken as not enough feed. Spot on comment. And this is why in soil and in these living soils, bacteria are really important. You need to make sure you've got a good microbial ecosystem within the soil. Fungi, I never know which is the preferred way to say it, but I like saying fungi. Make sure that that's really active and live. They help break down nutrients for the plant to uptake. Fungi, it basically extend the root system massively and help with the uptake of nutrients. And it's the most important part of living soils and when you're growing in soil. Indica's said, do you use air stones in a DWC system as this can affect pH? So we were talking about this yesterday on our Instagram at NPK_Hydroponics. What I was saying there is if you have a reservoir to hand feed or to use to feed your plants, and you want to oxygenate that water with nothing in it, then if you oxygenate through an air stone, it can affect the pH massively, especially in soft water areas. I learned something yesterday because in hard water areas, I don't have any experience in hard water areas because I live in Liverpool. Their extra calcium and magnesium, they don't tend to have the pH issues if they use an air stone in reservoirs. But in DWC, when the roots are there, the roots have a real impact on pH. So they can really help manage the pH fluctuations. And if you're using a good nutrient as well, then that can help manage the pH fluctuations. But the biggest effect is if you're in a closed room system using an air pump into your DWC. And in a closed room system, you have to supplement with carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide pumped into your water basically makes it really acidic. I believe it's carbonic acid off the top of my head. It can produce carbonic acid. It's carbon dioxide being dissolved into water. And obviously that has a massive effect on pH. So just keep your eye on it. DWC grows, you've got to stay on the ball with your pH. Taurus Hydro, make a little nifty gadget. Throw that into your DWC. Keeps your pH at between 5.8 and 6.2. But we'll talk about that next week. 420 said, you have to in DWC, but not in flood and drain because the water gets aerated when it flows back into the tank during the cycle. But you know that already. yeah. So flood and drain is brilliant because it's oxygenating by its nature of feeding the plant. In bubblers or DWC, you do have to oxygenate the water. And then, you two just carry on with your little conversation, but we love it. I love the fact that you're all commenting and talking to each other because I want to build up a little bit of a family. And everyone that's joining live, I do appreciate it. I know it's a Wednesday, it's 4:00. You spend an hour to 2 hours with me sometimes. I do genuinely appreciate it. 420 said, off-topic question, but not seen Barry in ages. Hope he's all good. Miss him. So Barry, because of Brian's mishap, has had to work and do all the jobs that Brian does. So he's working hard in the shop And Barry may be back on the podcast. I don't know. We will see. We'll see if he's got that comfortable now in the shop. It's all Christmas decorations. It's nice and warm. He doesn't have to be baffled by my stupid science. So we might have to do a bit of cajoling to get Barry back on the podcast, because I think he's slipped back into his comfortable shop life. We'll see. Instagram, airstone in the pot, new wave in the res. That's what I like to see. Airstone in the pots, oxygenating with the system, and a newer circulating pump, making sure that all your nutrients are well mixed. And then Newts and Roots said, best thing is the newer wave runner for the flexi tank. I'm running Alien Easy Feed. Tried an airstone, pH went up massive. Wave runner, definitely. So we love having the nutrients circulated as well. And the newer water movers now are magnetic. So on flexi tanks, who had the flexi tank and tried to get that friggin' sucker attached to the flexi tank, you basically couldn't. So it would always drop to the bottom. You'd have to stick your hand in the nutrient water. Most of the time it's freezing cold, and you're walking out with the tops of your shirt all soaking with water, looking like a proper weirdo. So thank God for magnetic water movers these days. Yeah, Barry loves the banter as well. He loves taking the piss out of me, but it's always at my expense. So no, I might just stick to myself, but we'll see how Barry feels. He said one day he might just burst in and put the world to rights again, but we'll see. But Barry's good. All the lads in the shop are good. Brian's on the mend, and we love you all. So everyone on Instagram, thank you very much for joining. Everyone on YouTube, thank you very much for joining live. And of course, everyone listens to the podcast. This has been podcast 196 with myself, Stephen. Barry may come back. We'll see how relaxed he is. Have a great Sunday for listening on the Sunday. Whenever you listen. Oh, America. I think it's Thanksgiving in America. So big happy Thanksgiving to everyone in the US and everyone else around the world. Thank you very much for joining. See you all next week for an actual systems podcast part 2. And send us your questions in the meantime. Love yous all. Take care. Bye-bye.